While the members of a community may gather in times of peace or celebration, it's frequently the case that the coming together of many people is incentivized not by joy, but by tragedy. Somerville, Massachusetts, a small city known these days perhaps for its lively art and music scene, was rocked by one such tragedy in the case of Deanna Cremin, a friendly, popular, all-around sweet teenage girl who was brutally killed on her way home just a short walk away from her house. Deanna had what seemed to be a fairly average upbringing in Somerville, growing up with her older sister Christine and 2 brothers. She lived in Winter Hill with them, her mother Catherine, and her stepfather Michael. She had a contagious smile and seemed to have an easy time making friends, known for being outgoing and incredibly friendly. On top of this, she had a particular fondness for children and was involved in her school's childhood development program. Between working a job at a local store called Star Market, attending school, and participating in extracurricular activities, Deanna had a very tight schedule, but kept up a busy social life as well. She had many friends she'd frequently go out with, as well as a boyfriend, Thomas LeBlanc. Thomas, or Tommy as he was known, worked with Deanna at Star Market. She frequently went to visit him at his home, which was only about half a mile away from her own house, and the night of March 29, 1995 was no different. Not much is clear on the events that took place at Tommy's house that night. It was a cold Wednesday evening, and after attending school that day, Deanna went to visit him as she often did. Other than Tommy and Deanna, one other person, Tommy's friend Jason, was present at the house. The 3 hung out for some time, and later into the night, Deanna's mother, Kathy, received a call from her daughter that she would not be able to make it home in time for her 10 p.m. curfew, as she would be staying at Tommy's house a bit late to finish watching a TV show with him. 10 p.m. came and went, and Deanna still had not arrived home. Having to work early the next morning, Kathy went to bed. She awoke again around midnight, finding that Deanna still was not home, and deciding to call her on the pager that the teenager had received for her birthday just a few days prior. There was no answer. Kathy mentally chastised her daughter for staying out so late and, assuming that Deanna had decided to spend the night with her boyfriend, went back to bed with the intention of reprimanding her in the morning. This decision was something that would haunt her for years to come. In the morning, Kathy awoke to get ready for work, only to find that her daughter still had not returned home. She made a phone call to Tommy, who explained that he'd walked Deanna halfway home before parting ways with her so that he could go home and accept a food delivery. Tommy explained that he hadn't seen or heard from Deanna since, and that he'd assumed that she'd gotten home safe. He'd left her only a block away from her house. Alarmed, Kathy spent her commute and her time at work repeatedly paging Deanna, receiving no response over and over again. She'd informed her husband Michael, Deanna's stepfather, who called Deanna's school and learned that she had been counted as absent for that morning. After many more attempts to contact Deanna, Kathy finally received a phone call, not from her daughter but from Michael. He had received a call from the police department and told Kathy that she needed to come home immediately. She asked him what had happened. He told her, "You know what happened." When Kathy returned home, the street was flooded with police cars. Deanna's body had been discovered that morning by 2 children that she used to babysit who were on their way to school. She'd been found behind a senior living facility, face up and half undressed, having been sexually assaulted and strangled to death. The struggle had been so violent that one of her hips had been broken. There had been no attempt to hide her body. Kathy, Michael, and the rest of Deanna's friends and family were completely shattered. The news of Deanna's death spread rapidly throughout Somerville, and the beginnings of the investigation were rife with both disbelief and confusion. All eyes quickly went to Deanna's boyfriend Tommy, having been the last person known to see her alive. At this very early stage, it was alleged that law enforcement were not considering him a suspect. He was brought in for questioning and told officers exactly what he had told Kathy. He'd walked Deanna halfway home, then returned home to accept a food delivery. His friend Jason corroborated this story, and Tommy was able to produce a receipt from the delivery. In these early stages, Tommy was fairly compliant with the investigation. Kathy recalls him weeping at Deanna's wake, just as affected by the grisly news as the rest of Deanna's friends and family. In time, however, Deanna's friends began to come forward with their doubts about Tommy's character. Tommy was manipulative, they said, and possessive in his relationship with Deanna. At best, he had been described as shy and quiet, but Kathy also described Tommy as obsessive, citing several letters that he had written to Deanna in the past. Prior to her death, Deanna had once confided in her mother that she had been considering breaking up with Tommy for his erratic behavior. As time went on, Tommy distanced himself more and more from the situation. He refused a polygraph test, he held no interest in helping with the investigation. He and his friend Jason both pleaded the fifth when faced with a grand jury. And when the time for Deanna's funeral came, Tommy was nowhere to be found. Tommy and Jason both obtained a lawyer shortly following the tragedy, spoke very little on the subject, and incidentally ended their friendship sometime shortly thereafter. Kathy herself has long been extremely skeptical of Tommy. Her daughter's killing was a crime of passion, she thinks, and has stated that she also believes in the possibility that Deanna had tried to break up with Tommy and that he'd killed her in a fit of rage. All of this conjecture, of course, isn't entirely baseless. 2 months after Deanna's death, Tommy's mother filed a restraining order against him. She stated that since childhood he had been prone to fits of rage, and that a recent escalation in these outbursts had made her wary of him. Since the very beginning, Tommy has always been the obvious person of interest. However, even early on, he was not the only person under scrutiny for Deanna's death. Deanna's friends came forward with more information, this time about a local firefighter named Charlie Houghton. They explained that the two had been acquainted, and that Charlie, despite being significantly older than Deanna, had taken a romantic interest in her. Likely unbeknownst to Deanna's friends at the time was the fact that Charlie had a history of sex crimes to his name, and because of Deanna's sexual assault before her murder, police began questioning him as a potential person of interest. The exact nature of Charlie and Deanna's relationship was unknown, but rumored to be romantic in nature, as Kathy recalled the time when her youngest son, Mark, claimed to have seen Deanna kissing Charlie in his car. Charlie was eventually cleared as a person of interest, though even today his innocence has been questioned. Charlie came from a politically connected family, and some believe that his clearance from the crime was nothing more than a cover-up. This sentiment of suspicion or botched police work surrounding Deanna's death tends to pervade the line of questioning for those looking into this case. There wasn't much evidence found at the scene, save for a single one of Tommy's hairs on Deanna, which could very well have been there on account of her spending the evening with him. However, the investigation would also lead to the discovery of DNA evidence underneath Deanna's fingernails, and as she was sexually assaulted, it's more than likely that a sexual assault kit was used to collect more DNA. This tends to raise many questions, namely, was this DNA ever tested, and was it tested against the persons of interest in Deanna's murder? Controversially, there exists a massive number of felons in the state of Massachusetts, about 10 to 15,000, who have not been made to submit their DNA for legal record. Assuming that Deanna's killer was none of the persons of interest, and instead an unknown assailant who has since been convicted of an unrelated crime, this means that the DNA found at the scene has been sitting unused instead of being tested for a match against several known criminals who may have been in the area at the time. The implications of this in Deanna's case, as well as in many similar unsolved murders in the state of Massachusetts, are understandably upsetting. The third and final noted person of interest in the case is an unnamed man who was spotted at the scene of the crime sometime after Deanna's death. While it's entirely possible that said man had nothing to do with the actual murder, police created a sketch of the man in the hopes that he may have potentially been a witness to the crime. He was described as a white man around 40 to 45 years of age, standing at around 5'9" to 5'11" and having short, dark hair. Little else is known of the man or his identity. Although rarely considered a person of interest, Deanna's stepfather Michael is another name that's been brought up infrequently in the discussion of her potential killer. While no explicit motive exists, Michael was known for being a violent man who physically abused Deanna's mother and tormented his stepdaughters, pulling a gun on Deanna's older sister Christine and killing her pet cat on another occasion. Despite these violent tendencies, there's little evidence that he would have had reason to kill Deanna, and he's said to have also been haunted by her death until his own passing years later. Deanna's death brought unspeakable grief to her friends and family, and despite a massive outpouring of support from the community of Somerville, Kathy felt forever changed by the loss of her daughter. In the ensuing years, she would struggle with depression and substance abuse, which led to the brief loss of custody of her young sons. She and Michael would divorce, Deanna's death seeming like a bomb that would ruin not only a teenage girl's chance at life, but also the lives of her family, who scrambled to pick up the pieces that were left behind. In time, Kathy regained control of her life and became sober, led forward by the thoughts of the life that her late daughter would want her to live. Every year, without fail, a memorial mass is held for Deanna in her hometown of Somerville. Attendees, including Kathy, hold a march where they symbolically walk Deanna the rest of the way home, stopping briefly at the site where her body was found to honor her. Over the years, many efforts have been made to commemorate her life, including the dedication of a children's playground in the area that now goes by her name, as well as a square in the city now named after her as well. Those that knew her look back on her with fondness, cherishing her brief life for her enthusiasm for all things, as well as all of the joy that she brought to those around her. The last 29 years have been a tireless effort for Deanna's surviving family. To this day, Kathy advocates for her daughter, having made it her life's goal to ensure that Deanna's killer is someday found.
something happened to my daughter, because and it was someone that knew her, and I have a great idea of a timeline of events. I had to put that out there because I just want everybody to know, Deanna is that important that I am going to find out things, and I'm going to help other people find out things about their unsolved murder, because this is totally unjust and it's crazy. And I don't know how I have not yet let it destroy me in the 19 years. Thank you to every single one of you for being here today. And you have no idea of the gratitude I have.
Thank you.